In the bustling heart of Silicon Valley, Alex Browning was a face amongst many. He wasn't a prodigy or a CEO of a multi-million-dollar startup. Alex was an unremarkable computer engineer, a minor but essential cog in the colossal machine that is the tech industry. His daily life was punctuated by the rhythmic tapping of his fingers on the keyboard, the dull hum of servers, and a sea of code that could either make or break his day. His existence was comfortable in its predictability. The weekends were filled with long bike rides across the city, the warm company of a small group of close friends, and endless debates on the latest tech innovations over craft beers. His small one-bedroom apartment was a sanctuary, every corner filled with a piece of Alex's personality. From the row of neatly arranged sci-fi books on the shelf to the worn-out couch in front of the massive TV where he binged on his favorite shows. Then, his predictable life was shattered by an inexplicable change. Alex woke up feeling unusually stiff. His skin felt odd, tough, and coarse. Alarmed, he ran to the bathroom mirror, finding patches of his skin covered in a thick, hardened layer. It looked grotesque, like a sheet of toughened armor had grown overnight. He prodded and pinched, the usual soft give of flesh replaced by an almost inelastic response. His heart pounded in his chest, the ear-ringing silence of the apartment amplifying his panic. He frantically searched his mind for a reasonable explanation. An allergic reaction, some weird insect bite, or perhaps a rare disease. He had always been a worrier, his mind spinning webs down the worst-case scenario rabbit hole. In desperation, he reached for his phone, his fingers loosing grip on the small device multiple times before managing to search for his symptoms. The search results turned up an array of skin conditions, none of which resembled what he was experiencing. As days bled into weeks, Alex's condition progressed from bizarre to downright terrifying. The patches of hardened skin, initially peppering his torso, began spreading to his limbs, neck, and face. His reflection morphed into an uncanny spectacle, the familiar contours of his body being overtaken by the grotesque growth. His fingers, once nimble on the keyboard, were now encased in the toughened second skin, making even the simplest tasks a challenge. He felt trapped in his own body, a prisoner to this freakish affliction. The lack of sensation, the alien feeling of the new skin under his clothes, instilled a mounting sense of dread that lingered like a haunting dream he couldn't wake up from. Alex sought medical help, hopping from one specialist to another, but each appointment ended in puzzled looks and apologies. The endless tests and biopsies yielded no answers, leaving him trapped in a limbo of uncertainty. His skin resisted all attempts at treatment, seeming to repel the very idea of medication. Word of his condition spread through his workplace, transforming his colleagues' casual curiosity into morbid fascination, and then into fear. The whispers grew louder and the isolation more palpable. He became an outcast, shunned by his coworkers, his neighbors, and even his friends. His social life, once a source of joy and companionship, collapsed like a house of cards. His once cherished sanctuary became his prison. His days were filled with isolation and fear, punctuated by the occasional vapid ping of unsolicited junk mail. The rhythmic tapping on the keyboard now, a thing of memory, replaced by the hollow echo of his new skin, striking the keys one at a time. His predictable life was spiraling into a nightmare from which he saw no escape. Months rolled by, marked by a relentless sense of isolation and growing despair. Alex's life had fallen apart at the seams. The cozy apartment, once filled with the hum of hobbies and activity, now resounded with a deafening silence. His job was a distant memory. Being laid off was a severe blow that left him grappling with financial insecurity. One evening, while trying to cook a simple meal with his hardened hands, he spilled boiling water on himself. Instinctively, he braced for the burning pain and closed his eyes from the ruined flesh. Instead, he felt nothing. Confused and bewildered, he looked down to see the boiling water rolling off his skin like droplets on a waxed car hood. His shock turned into a morbid fascination as he started testing his new skin's limits. It was impervious to heat, cold, and could withstand significant pressure. He even found that he was unaffected by sharp objects. Knife blades simply skidded off without leaving a mark. As he continued his experiments, he noticed another startling development. His second skin seemed to respond to his thoughts, contracting and expanding subtly as if in a form of understanding. Initially, he wrote it off as a product of his isolation, a desperate mind concocting companionship in madness. However, the conversations with his skin became increasingly complex. It began communicating in rudimentary symbols, tracing patterns on his arms and torso. His skin seemed to tell him it was there to protect him, a friend shielding him from harm. At first, he laughed it off, a humorless chuckle that echoed in the empty apartment. But as the symbols became more intricate, the idea took root in his mind. The thought was both comforting and terrifying. Comforting, because for the first time in months, he felt he wasn't alone in this ordeal. Terrifying, because it suggested his reality was even stranger than he'd feared. As the weeks turned into months, Alex's second skin became a constant companion, its cryptic messages a mystery he was determined to unravel. Its constant chatter of protection and danger felt like an enigma wrapped in a riddle. And while it didn't explicitly mention an impending disaster, the ominous undertones were impossible to ignore. Then, it happened. The city's normal hustle and bustle came to a grinding halt. Emergency broadcast messages blared from every device, warning of catastrophic events. There were strange growths appearing all over the world, including in his city. Egg-like clusters of unknown origin that would replace themselves when destroyed and continued to grow in number. Chaos ensued. People scrambled to evacuate, the city's roads choked with cars and panicked residents. Rioting and looting, gunshots rang out while distant explosions punctuated the growing disorder. Sirens wailed in the distance, the urgent calls for help filling the air. There was no help to be had, and nowhere to go. Alex sat in his apartment, paralyzed with dread and panic. The world outside his window was in a state of pandemonium, but his second skin remained eerily calm, almost serene. Despite the chaos outside, he felt a strange sense of security. It was as if his skin were asserting its earlier claims of protection, promising safety amongst chaos. As the clusters opened throughout the city, Alex braced himself for the worst. Screams echoed through the streets as a green fog of death spread forth like a tidal wave. He expected to choke, to gasp for breath, to feel his life slipping away. But none of that happened. The second skin tightened around him, forming an impenetrable shield. His lungs filtering the air clean amidst the deadly miasma. He watched the horrifying spectacle unfold outside, the city he knew transforming into a silent wasteland. His isolation, which once seemed like a curse, had now become his salvation. The skin had been true to its word. It had protected him from an unimaginable catastrophe. In the days following the hatching, Alex wandered through the devastated cityscape, stepping over bodies that seemed to host a bright green moss. The once vibrant city was now a ghost town, its streets filled with the eerie silence of the dead. Buildings stood as grim reminders of what once was, their hollowed-out windows staring blankly into the unseen sky. He stumbled upon the source of the deadly gas. Bizarre clusters of huge egg-like growths that had spread all over the city. Their alien forms jutted out from the city's ruins like alien monuments. As the news had reported, similar clusters had appeared worldwide, each bringing their unique form of destruction and subsequent creation. As Alex observed the clusters, a vague sense of familiarity washed over him. His mind flashed back to a forgotten and innocuous incident that happened right before his transformation, one he'd dismissed until now. He'd bought a tray of organic farm eggs, and one of them was unusually large and oddly textured. He didn't think much of it then, as it wasn't uncommon for organic eggs to have a blue or greenish hue. Now, however, he suspected that it might not have been an egg at all, but an immature form of these clusters. Could it be that his second skin originated from that tainted egg? The possibility was too unbelievable, too surreal, yet the evidence was undeniable. His skin, despite its horrific appearance, had protected him from the lethal gases released by these eggs. The truth about his condition started to fall into place. His second skin was a defense mechanism, an adaptation against the monstrous forces that now threatened the world. It was a horrifying realization, yet there was an undeniable logic to it. As he looked at the loathsome clusters, he couldn't help but feel a sense of dread for the future. If these eggs had wrought such havoc, what more lay in store for the world? The thought chilled him to the bone. His skin tightened around him in response, offering silent reassurance. Despite the bleak prospects, he wasn't alone in this world.